everyone. Welcome back to the ImprovED podcast. My name is Justin Coffey, and I'm an assistant principal at Ulysses High School in Ulysses, Kansas. And you can find me on Twitter at Justin B. Coffey. And my co-host, Jennifer Farr, is not with us today. She had important family things to take care of. And so you can always look for her on Twitter at Jennifer M. Farr. But I'm super excited about a guest that we have today. We have one of my most favorite educators in the world. And so let me just give you a short little introduction. This is Ginger Lewman. And Ginger is a secondary level educator who works with teachers grades 4 through the collegiate level with project-based learning, redesigning their systematic approach to teaching and learning. And she's awakening from her own background of abuse, addiction, trauma, and healing. And so there's all of that, but also she is a mentor of mine personally, and someone who I think helped awaken me to a different way of teaching and a different way to help my students learn. And so I'm super happy to have you on the podcast, Ginger Lewman. It's been too long, but welcome to the ImprovED podcast.
Thank you. I think this is as good as it's going to get. I think we should end at the wrap. Thank you. That's it. That was amazing. Let her open her mouth and she'll totally ruin that amazing.
Oh, whatever. That is not true at all.
No, this is exciting to be here. It's been a little bit since I've done a podcast. I heard you say you're super excited, and I thought, I say that all the time, and I try not to say that about every single guest, but I end up doing that. Yeah. Do you?
I think I do.
Well, but it may be true still.
It is true. It is true. I don't think I've had a guest on and I'm like, they're all right. So.
You're not invited. Those of you who are like, man, no. By the way, if you haven't been invited, it doesn't mean he feels that way. Your turn just hasn't come around yet.
That's just right. Saying. That's right. We're only on episode 12 here, so I'm getting to you.
Yes, that's right. That's right. You should call in and say, hey, you need me on your podcast. You should do that.
Please do. Find me on Twitter. Well, okay, Ginger, at the ImprovED podcast, we are looking to push the evolution of teaching through having conversations with great educators. So that's why I wanted to bring you on today, because you helped push my personal evolution as a teacher. And I know that you've done the same for many, many other teachers, not only just in Kansas, but throughout not only just the United States, but throughout the world with a lot of the help that you've been providing for teachers. But where I kind of want to get started is project-based learning is a big deal for you. And I'm interested in what part of your history or background brought you to this educational philosophy of project-based learning today. I'm sure there's lots of things. There's not just a single point that brought you to project-based learning. But can you share a little bit of how you got into project-based learning?
I got into it accidentally, actually. I was dabbling around the edges of it, and I didn't even know. And so how I got into project-based learning is, let me go back a little bit. So originally I'm a social studies teacher, right? How long do you want these answers? Because me, I can go on and on, or I can give you
succinct. Go on and on. No, I'd love to hear it all.
Well, my mother met my father with originally I'm a social studies teacher, and I was, the worst stereotypical social studies teacher out there, because that's how I experienced social studies, and I enjoyed it because I'm a nerd, where, you read the book or you don't, and you do the questions at the end, or you look at them and, they're the chapter or whatever, and you do the worksheet, and you do the video because, that's cool, and you assign a couple of essays because you're rigorous, right? And, and that was me. Well, I gotta, really catch them being wrong so I can really help them be right. Sure. And that's who I was for a long time. And I got my master's in special education, psychology, special education with an emphasis in gifted ed. And that's where I started learning that different people exist in our classrooms. And I knew that, but from a teacher point of view, I mean, I was a different person in the classroom, but I was okay with the classroom being what it was because I found ways around what the teachers were asking us to do. And I figured, I'm feeding myself, right? And it turns out that teachers don't always like that in all their kids. So anyway, I got this master's, and I started learning about this thing called differentiated instruction. And I thought, holy moly, this is not only good for my bright kids, but it's also good for kids who struggle academically, and it's good for everybody. And I started talking with my colleagues about it and really pushing them to help all kids with differentiated instruction. And yeah, it was interesting. I pushed them, but that doesn't mean they all listened. And I learned a lot of how not to teach other teachers. I'm fresh. Let me educate you. And there was an old veteran teacher who came into me, and he'd give me some wisdom. And he and I didn't always get along, but it was nice of him to talk to me. And he said, I just want to let you know, we don't need educated. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. They did need educated, but not in that style and not with that frame of mind. They did need to learn some things. I needed to learn some things too, and I was coming to teach them. Anyway, so I'm raising a bit of a ruckus in the district, and our school district decided that this is what they said. We have kids in our area who want to learn, but who for some reason are not learning. And we want to start a school that helps them. And I got tapped and said, hey, Ginge, why don't you come run this school? And I said, no. I would work there. I'd be happy to work there. I would love to, get some differential, proving ground of what I say is workable and can be done. And they said, well, and they had other people apply for the job of director, and they just kept turning them down. And I got that tap, and I said, well, they said, are you opposed to talking about it? So I went and talked with them. And where it came out of it was, it was a 2006. They said it needs to be a one-to-one laptop school, and it needs to be project-based learning. And I said, that's cool. I understand differentiated instruction. And they're like, not the same thing. So I got 2 days of training, luxury days of training with the Buck Institute in June, and
that's plenty.
And in July. Oh yeah, that's all you need, really. You're stupid. I'm sorry, I said that out loud. If you're courageous and feel like you can learn stuff on your own and be given the room to make a whole lot of mistakes, that's for real.
Yeah.
And so I got those 2 days in June, and in August we opened up the school, and by we I mean the parents and the kids and I, because I was the only teacher. Grades 5 through 8, all together, all subjects. And I'm a social studies teacher, right? I mean, I'm teaching math, I'm teaching PE, are you freaking kidding me? I'm terrible at this. And that first year I did one good project, one. And like I said, I had all the kids grades 5 through 8 together. And I made a lot of mistakes, and I figured it out. And in that, there was that proving ground of knowing that kids are individuals, and that every kid has different strengths and talents, and that every kid has things that they can contribute, and that bright kids need to have their butts kicked a little differently, a little harder, with love, and that other kids who struggle academically can still contribute as well, and learn and teach with the bright kids. And I can do this, and I couldn't. I mean, it was really bad for a while, but I got better, and we grew that school and doubled in size, nearly doubled again. And by the time I left, we were grades K through 8.
Oh my goodness!
And I hired on lots of staff, and we were in the process of building a high school.
Wow! So
that I call that baptism by lava, is what it's what solidified it. To me, it was getting the master's in gifted ed, which is what shifted my brain to looking at school differently than what I'd ever experienced it as a kid. I was a good kid in school, but I totally called and phoned in my grades. I didn't give a crap. I'm mostly A's, a couple of B's because I don't care, and mom and dad are cool with it. They're like, just get scholarships. And I was like, cool. So I'm there to get grades and get scholarships. And I didn't care about learning, and then it was a turning point. It was a turning point for me. It's really changed. And and the life's never been the same. I met a guy named Kevin Honeycutt who blew my mind with his crazy ideas. And he'd say, I bet you can do this. And he had some crazy belief in me being better than what I really was. And I felt I owed it to him because he came with great ideas. Mm-hmm. And so I thought, well, I'm lacking in ideas. I mean, I'm writing freaking policy, starting a school. I'm on a very linear brain, right? While still trying to be creative. He comes in with these big creative ideas. I'm like, well, like I said, I owe you. Let's try this, because he's out on the road trying to find a proving ground to his crazy ideas, and that's me. And we started a partnership, and things really changed at that, even more so.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, in Kansas, we're working on this redesign, and we're trying to reimagine what school could look like and what school should look like. And really, that's what you did back in the days. You redesigned a school from the ground up. And so,
well, it's not really redesigning, though, is it? Though, if you do it from ground up, I never had to change things, just other than in my mind, heart, and in my parents' expectations, and in the new staff. So maybe I did redesign. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I just ran that. I ran that. You said, she said that I get a lot. Well, you didn't really redesign, but maybe I did. Yeah. Anyway, go on. Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, can you talk about some of the work that I know that you've been involved with some schools in the redesign process in Kansas? And can you talk about some of the things that school districts or teachers are thinking or talking about with redesign? I mean, project-based learning is a big piece of it. Do you agree?
It is. I was actually happy to hear that, because there's no guarantee that when the state comes out and says, we're going to do things differently, and they start giving examples of what different might be. I'm never a fan of giving examples. I want people to find their own examples, because if I give an example, you're going to build what I show you, right?
Yeah,
and so the state started giving, especially if it's anybody in authority. Whether it's a teacher who says, this is an example, the kids are like, well, teacher like that, I'm going to do that one. Mm-hmm. And there's a very little creativity and personality that happens when you're just mocking up someone else's stuff. I don't mean mocking as making fun of, but you're just doing their stuff. So the state started coming out and saying, we want to do these sorts of things in project-based learning. And I was excited and horrified all at the same moment. Oh no. And it's really turning out really well. Right now I'm coaching, I counted them up the other day, 9 schools, wow. Middle schools and high schools. They don't let me get near elementary because actually that's not true. Actually, now that I say that, I hope they don't watch this. I got 3 elementary schools this year. Maybe I won't share this out. Sorry, Justin.
They're pretty much middle schoolers. They're pretty much.
I'm not working with the kids. I don't get the cool thing is that I don't have to come in and be an expert. I get to come in and remind the teachers that they know stuff, and remind them that they know kids. And then I ask them a lot of questions about possibilities. I mean, how can you not love that sort of role? And that's what redesign really is. At Turning Point, I had the opportunity. I didn't have the structure, someone to hand to me of, hey, rethink everything you've ever known about school. I just sat down and I thought about it a lot by myself. I talked a lot about it with people like Kevin and other people online all across the country, and listened to a lot of people. And I talked to the parents and I talked to the kids. And like I said, that first year I made a crap ton of mistakes. And really the questions that I just kept saying over and over and over in myself was, what do we currently know and do that is school? So if I'm thinking about rethinking lunch, right? We have a blank slate here. We can make lunch whatever it is. Well, what do I believe about lunch? What do I hate about what currently happens in lunch situations? Mm-hmm. And how can I fix that? Or how could we fix that? Or how could we, what about schools stinks? What about it's amazing? What is it needs tweaked? And so we just go from there. And so it really took me down, and everything came through this one question is, what's the purpose? Why do we do it this way? What's the purpose? Well, if the purpose is to do this, and that's not happening, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do something else. And to me, the purpose of school is more than just reading, writing, and arithmetic, but it is a piece of it. So that's going to be a piece. But it's also about creating good human beings. So, for instance, with our lunches, my kids did lunch chores. They had a hierarchy set up, and there was a supervisor or two. As we grew in size, we had to have a couple of different supervisors. And then kids would have a rotation of whether they were wiping tables or sweeping floors or washing dishes, which I had 8th graders come in, no idea how to use a broom, no idea how to wash a dish, or wiping the counters in the kitchen, that sort of thing, cleaning out microwaves and stuff like that. And then we went out to break, and we took an hour-long lunch period because it's important for developing little humans. And as staff, as it was me, and then we brought in more teachers, we didn't have a duty-free lunch because we don't have time off from the kids. The kids are our family. We sat down and ate with them, and we had conversations.
I was just going to ask, were you allowed to talk?
Oh my gosh. We were encouraged to talk like human beings would eat at the table, right? And they're eating like they are. They're eating with their fingers. They're having their lunches or whatever. And I'm not really like hard on etiquette. It's not mommy dearest over here, right? But we are having conversations, and we're being nice to one another, and we're listening to one another. And there were days I wasn't the best dinner companion because my brain was dead by lunch, or I was working on something else, but I still sat there with them. I didn't go off to another space to work on things because this is family. And when we all got finished, we didn't, because the kids, they always did at the beginning of every year, kids would sit down and in 3 minutes have their food eaten and be like, can I go out to lunch? Can I go out to break? Can I go out? Because they wanted to play for a full hour. I get it. But we, at this place, are going to learn to chew and have conversations with one another. And it's okay that you ate fast today. It's all right. Just sit right back down and have a conversation with some of your classmates. And to me, I wanted to run our school as a combination of home and office. I wanted it to feel comfortable, like a family. We call the kids who were there a long time, we call them veterans. And the ones who came in, like this was your first year, we call them newbies. The kids who were like 7th and 8th grade, we call them the old ones, 7th and 8th graders. And then we got the youngins. We had the youngins that we had to look after, and the kids were youngins. I said it that because I guess I grew up in Missouri or whatever, but that's what we just started calling youngins. Take care of the youngins. Okay. And then the combination of office is, we've got work too. So what does it feel like? It doesn't feel like a classroom where we're all sitting in straight rows with the teacher in the front of the room. And, we're moving and doing different projects and things. And we're not 45-minute increments, right? Where you're just like thinking really hard for just a minute and then 5 minutes next to the thing, you better get in and concentrate really hard on this. It's more of a bigger picture that we're building a thing that's more in depth where we can dig into it over time and really luxuriate in the depth of learning that comes from it. This was a hard thing to do. Parents were not pleased in some ways because they come in and they were like, well, where's Power School where I could check my kids' grades? And we don't do that because we don't emphasize grades. We emphasize learning. You want to know how your kids learn? Let's sit down and have a talk. And if you want to, come hang out at the school. And by the way, first place you should ask about your kid working and learning, you should talk to them first. And we did student-led conferences from the get-go for all year round, and it was truly student-led. It wasn't like I gave them worksheets, said fill it out and then talk. The kids built websites and had evidence of what work they were doing. And different kids built different websites on different platforms for whatever they wanted. And they share it with me, and we'd sit down and we'd already rehearse this because kids don't know how to run a meeting. So we'd rehearse it. Parents would come in and parents would look at me and say, all right, Ginger, Lewman, whatever, what's going on? And I would say, and I would look right at the kid. I wouldn't say a word, right? And the kid would say, Mom, Dad, thank you so much for coming into the meeting today. And then we'd get going and it would run it from there. So 90% of the questions the parents would ask me, I would say, good question. I'd look at the kid and they would answer it. And they got really good at talking and advocating for different things. So my kids were set in a role to teach others, their parents mostly, about the technology we were using. And we were very transparent with that. I mean, we were Skyping, we were using H.323 to connect with people all across the globe. It's fun to see people now start to talk about some of the social emotional things, like restorative justice and restorative justice circles. Apparently I was running those. I had no idea. It just made sense. But if people are not getting along, sit the heck down in a frickin' circle and let's talk it out, because we're a family, right? I didn't realize that was something. I mean, I knew it didn't happen in other schools, but I felt that it was important for us, and the staff came on and they added things too. More staff came on and added such value, and I could breathe a little bit, and only 18 hours a day, and it was a magical little utopia, that was working.
I don't mean to go down too many rabbit holes here, but there's a couple of things that just spark my interest. And one is, at lunch, conversations are so important. At parent-teacher conferences, conversations are so important. With discipline, conversations are so important. And I feel like when I'm in a lot of schools, what I hear is silence. Or not necessarily silence. I guess I hear the teacher talking, and I hear silence from the students. And so I think it's so important that students have a chance to talk and to create conversations with each other. They're not great at it, but the only way that they're going to get better is through practicing and giving them opportunities to talk. So
it's so big. And I get it though. As teachers, we always have a lack of time.
Yeah.
And we don't have time to let kids just screw around and not do it right, or maybe misinform one another. And kids don't know. If it's my job is to teach them, I get it. I get the pressure.
Yeah.
But how's that working for us? Limited at best. And if we tried a different way, where we took a little bit more time, maybe took some other things off of what we thought we must do off the plate, and really brought in a form of engagement to where we're not having to chase after the kids to do work, but create a space where they feel valued. All kids, it doesn't happen magically. I didn't have some sort of special group of kids. I mean, they turned into being special, but when they came to me, they were broken as anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And we healed together, because I too was healing. And if I could go back and do it again, I probably wouldn't. Because it was so freaking hard. Not by myself, right? But if I could go back and work in a place like that again, I haven't said anything out loud to bosses, but I wouldn't mind. I did the other day. I said, I want to take a sabbatical and go work at a school during this redesign, because it's delicious and it's where I want to be. And somebody said something about not getting paid to do it. Go ahead, but you probably won't have a job when you come back. And I thought, well, maybe I don't want it that bad. Maybe I'll just come in and co-teach. Maybe I'll just continue to see several schools.
Yeah, but it is delicious, because we are asking that question, what is the purpose? And schools that are doing redesign the right way, I think that's at the core of what they're trying to figure out. Is
there a wrong way to do design?
I haven't been in lots of schools that are redesigning, but I hear talk of if we just turn off all the bells, then we'll be doing school differently.
Ooh, well, yeah, you would. I mean, we didn't have bells.
Yeah.
But, what are bells? Because where do they come from? And we don't hear bells anywhere outside of the four walls of school. Yeah, it's a good piece. I think that a little piece like that would cause us to have to communicate more and more clearly and be a little more flexible with different things. It's a good start.
Or
if that's the only thing.
All the teachers just set the alarms on their phone to go off at the same time, and then and then they just keep doing the same thing. But
yeah,
I think if schools are asking what's the purpose of this, then we can start heading in the right direction.
School communities too, asking parents and kids to talk to.
Yes. Yes. So, okay, this is my second rabbit hole. I was going to avoid it, but now I can't. Speaking of community, I'm the reason why I was going to avoid it is because I can't remember the name, but I think the number is 150. And I think there's a researcher who is doing research on how many people we can like have a relationship with. Do you know about this?
Yeah, I've heard about it.
Okay.
I don't. As somebody who lives online and is connected and has been, I'm not sure that's 100% true, but oh yeah.
So you think the number is, we can be connected with more than 150? Well, you're connected.
I mean, deeply?
I guess feel a part of a community.
Oh, yes. I can feel a real part of a community and really know a lot of people more than 150. But if you're talking about the idea of how many people we might want to have in a school, because then I can know every single piece about their lives and who they are and what they've come from, and not because I'm a nosy Nancy or I'm going to use it against them or I'm going to punish them for it, but because I can understand them more as a whole person so that I can teach them and help educate them as a whole person. I think 150 is big, maybe too big.
Mm-hmm.
I think that depends too on the grade levels that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, obviously to make the best use of taxpayer money, you know, we probably can't have buildings that only hold 100 students or whatever. But I think when schools are redesigning, finding ways to create almost schools within schools or communities within a school where you're not just a number, you know, your school may have 2,000 people, but you have this group that you're connected with.
Man, we've been doing that in middle schools for 100 years. All right, yeah. For 30 years. I mean, that's what the middle school model is in larger schools. You have teams so that you've got 100, 120 kids, so you can know every single one of them and really get them. I've heard this recently there that people say, well, we should do that. I'm like, we have been. And how many middle schools are rolling back from the middle school format into more of a junior high to prepare them for the high school model, which was maybe what's not really necessarily preparing them for today. Okay,
so here's a question that I had written down here. When you're talking project-based learning with teachers, one thing that I hear when I talk to teachers is, well, I'm trying to prepare them for college. And in college, they're going to have lectures, and it's really important that students learn. We can't just have fun. She's leaving the interview.
I'm fleeing. She's fleeing. Isn't that from Fargo? She's fleeing the interview. He's fleeing the interview. This is a college, one of the colleges that I'm working with.
In Nebraska.
Yes, right. It's a small liberal arts college, and it's not the only small liberal arts college. There's another here, a couple others here in Kansas that I'm working with who have invited me in to figure out how to move their entire faculty, not just the education, but the entire faculty toward project-based learning. And the reason why is they say, we've got declining enrollment and our kids don't care, and they're only here for sports, and we've got to get them engaged. I said, I got you with this. But every single faculty is scared to death because they're like, but we can't go to this kid model, this K-12 model, because, you know, if I come in to teach them and they get a sniff that I'm not professorial, that I am K-12, but we're not the same. Right. Yeah. Okay, so... So what I've done is I've gone and collected a ton of examples, articles, journal articles, videos, lots of evidence of project-based learning being used in a variety of Ivy League colleges, because everybody in colleges are like, oh, Ivy League's doing, oh, Stanford's doing, oh, they're doing this too. And I just a deluge of, no, you're not the only college who would be doing this. As a matter of fact, the fact that you aren't doing it yet, you're behind.
Yeah.
And that opens their ears and their hearts a little bit differently. And a lot of the small liberal arts colleges have a lot to do in their communities with service learning. A lot of them have a good connection that way, or are trying to grow it. And this is a beautiful way to make that just flow. Their struggle is they're getting kids who've never had to think and learn before. All they've had to do is just regurgitate. And so their college students are struggling with a project-based learning format. But once they get it, they love it, and they feel more prepared. I mean, it's the same thing. Yeah. And it's hilarious. I was sitting with I was with a college one time, and it was at lunchtime. I'd done the morning, this is what the world is, and we as teachers think we know what the future is, but when we're describing the future, oftentimes we're actually describing the now, and I'm showing them evidence for that sort of stuff, right? And their jaws are dropping. Okay, so lunch comes, and somebody says, I don't think the question came up, but I mentioned about how if I'm at an elementary, they say, great, we can do this, but when they get to middle school, they're not going to be prepared. We've got to really, school them. And then the middle school teachers are like, well, we can do this, but, the high school, they won't be prepared. And then when they get to the high school, well, they won't be ready for college. And I said, it just passes up this whole way. And literally the first question right after lunch is, well, so let's say we move our whole college this direction. When they get out into the world and taking taking certification tests and things like that, and I was just like, and I turned to the table and I was like, see, everybody asks this. And I say, if we teach people how to think and learn and problem solve and be creative and be doers and self-activators, doesn't matter where they go, they're going to be fine.
Yeah. Totally.
And I've seen it over and over.
Yep. Yeah. I agree. And
who's not fine? Those who are not fine are the ones who've gone through their whole careers with no child left behind. And now they're getting out into the field and people are like, why am I having to tell you what to, when to, how to? You're getting paid the same amount as me. Why am I having to babysit you, new hire? New hire's like, what? Just tell me what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the real thing. And you're right. When I look at MIT's media lab, I think it's just a big makerspace. That's what it sounds like, and they're all working on their individual projects. And so
yeah,
I agree. And what I've heard someone else say, it might've been you, actually, it sounds like something you would say is, oh, just because their future is going to suck, I should make their life suck right now too, or
I don't think I said that, but maybe you could give me credit on it. I'm pretty sure that's not mine.
the biggest thing that I see as I was diving into the world of project-based learning was my students were finally thinking, and it took a while for me to get them to do that because, like you said, they were not used to doing that and they resisted it. They're like, no, can you just tell me what I'm supposed to do? Which I get, but once they started thinking, then they were able to problem solve their way through. They were figuring things out that I hadn't even got to yet because they finally had to think. So
there was a student I used to know who really hated doing that sort of work. One, she'd have to talk to other people. Two, she couldn't just sit and stare at you, because she would sit like this in class, right? Uh-huh. And sometimes her eyes would close, but her head wouldn't nod because she had her hands like this, right? And she wouldn't do the homework, or do it right before class started and get it halfway finished and still ace all the tests, right? She was doing fine. She's getting good grades. And so if you ever asked her to do something where she had to build something of that, oftentimes she'd take a low grade and not care because, again, later she's going to ace your test because you're eventually going to go back to that other way. And it was about grades. It was not about learning. Yeah. You can call her Ginger. You can call her.
I feel like I know her.
Amanda. You do. You probably had her in class, and that was me, but I was not a freaking anomaly. I mean, there are a million Gingers all over the place, and then there are the other kids who we've created little terrified perfectionists. That if they don't please us with what we've asked for, then they're very unhappy. That means they're not as good as they thought they were, and they start to crumble inside, and they get paralyzed. And that is not an anomaly either. And then we have other kids who are like, why are you bothering me? Just give me the assignment so I can throw it in the trash and say I lost it, and you can give me the F. This is how the routine goes.
Yes, I know.
I can't do that to babies anymore. I love them too much, and it matters too much. Every single one of them matters. That's something I've been talking about lately, is the concept of, with No Child Left Behind, we said that, and I know that's many, many years ago. I know that. But it's still so deeply ingrained in so many of us, either because we came up through the system as kids, or we were trained to as teachers to be that. That we wanted 100% of our kids to get 100% or whatever it was. They were all going to be successful on the tests. And when No Child Left Behind rolled back, we said, yeah, 100% is a bunch of crap. There's no way that we're ever going to get 100% successful. So we're going to roll that back, and we're going to set some other number which is more acceptable. And if you think about that, acceptable, being a history, social studies sort of person, I think acceptable that we're okay with not 100% getting to be successful. In Kansas right now, we're defining successful as through our combination of measures of how well they're doing 5 years down the road after us. It's not just grades, it's not just tests, it's not just high school graduation rates. But it's a little bit more than that. And that number is still not 100%. And I can't help but think it's an acceptable loss, which is a term that's used in the military, which means that we're going to send some troops into battle, and we know that some of our own guys will be killed. But in order to take this hill or whatever, we have to have this number of people sacrificed, right? That's what they signed up for. That's our acceptable loss. People dying. And I think that's not too dissimilar when we say we're okay with not 100%. Yeah, no, not 100% will be successful, and we're okay with that. And if anybody says that to me, I say, okay, cool, let's go for a walk down the hallway. I want you to point to me the kids that you're okay with not being successful. Point that kid out to me right now and say, that's okay. That kid can fail because they suck. Tell me that. And own it. And when we really start thinking about acceptable losses in kids, we got to rethink this thing of maybe not 100%. Now, according to test scores, no, that's a bunch of crap. Multiple measures, farther down the road, 100%. It has to be 100%. There's no other option.
Yeah, yeah. And for my secondary world, it's hard for me to look at a line of seniors and nope, not going to make it. I'm okay with that acceptable loss. It's impossible. But then my wife is a kindergarten teacher, to go into the kindergarten room with all those bright futures ahead of all those kids, and to try and point out. And here's the worst part is my wife could point to one and say, he's going to have a tough road. But to say we're okay with that one not making it, it's heartbreaking. Like there are things we can do knowing that it's going to be a tough road. There's things we can do to help that kid.
And those things probably aren't what we've been doing.
Yes.
And those things probably aren't going to fit in with our policies. Right? In fact, sometimes those policies are creating the hurdles that have the kids dropping out by the end of third grade. Right?
Yeah, right. It's totally true.
And so what are you and I going to do differently? Because it isn't just, them over there. Right. It's all of us.
Right.
Every single one. If you have had a Ginger in your classroom, or another kid one of those three that I've mentioned, right? There's so many different types of kids that we haven't even talked about. We talked about the kids who you can look at them in kindergarten and say that kid is growing up in a horrific life. And we know with data that not only is that kid maybe not going to succeed financially or career-wise, that kid statistically proven over time, will die 20 years sooner than you and me.
Mm-hmm.
And we can do something about that. There's science behind it, and there are real things that we can do. What we can't do is what we've always done.
Okay. Yes, exactly. So that's why I had a conversation with a teacher a few days ago, and she was talking about her class and how she was at the front of the room showing the students how to do this process. And then she turned around and 6 students had their heads down on the desk, like not even paying attention. And her immediate response is, they're so lazy. They just are not interested in learning about these things. And what I wanted, I didn't say it, and I need to say it, is, and yet we're going to do the same thing again tomorrow. Right? Like,
because
we're not going to. Yeah, like this is something we can fix, but we can't just keep doing the same thing because we're going to get the same outcomes over and over again. So I'm all about kids owning up to responsibility, and I'm not giving them an out. But if we're not doing anything to engage our students, then we're okay with that acceptable loss, right?
That's what we're saying.
So can you talk to me maybe about an example of a project maybe that you did at Turning Point, or an example of what learning could look like? Because sometimes even myself, I get stuck in, well, this is the way learning looks and this is how we've done it. And it's hard for me to see the potential or the possibility of what learning could look like. Can you share a little bit of that?
Yeah, so 100%. If anybody is nervous about changing your own classroom, well, gosh, this is what I've always known. I will tell you that in my experience, and then because I recognized it, I talked to other people. I'm like, am I crazy here? Is this real? The hardest class for me to change was social studies. Yeah. That was the hardest one for me to change, because every time I tried to change it, I felt one of my ancestors, one of my professors, or a previous teacher that I'd had who was like, no, they have to learn this in order to be a good citizen. And, these are lies that we tell ourselves because it justifies what we've always done.
Yeah.
And so if people are struggling, that's legit, that's real. So reach out to another teacher and say, let's open up the books here. You teach language arts, and I don't think we need to know all the things that you think we do. I teach social studies. What do you think we don't really need to know? And we're guessing as teachers. We're guessing. The best thing to do is, what if we could open this up to, other business folks, right? And say, okay, so let's open this up to as many people in our community as possible. And of these topics that we learn and teach, how many of these have you ever used beyond the 4 walls of school, right? Now, okay, maybe you didn't use them, but knowledge of them. How important was it to have a contextual understanding of this, and to really delve into what might be important and to engage them in this conversation and meaning. Also, that's dangerous to me. I know I'm not really answering your question. I'm going to ask our communities, to ask our kids, to ask our parents how we want to redesign school. I want their input, but at the end of the day, I'm like a fashion designer, right? If I have somebody with hideous taste come and ask me to build something for them to wear, and it's going to look terrible on them, I'm not going to build something on them, and they're not going to look terrible. I'm going to use my professional judgment and build something in the vein of what they were saying, understanding what they were going for, but make them beautiful that they couldn't even imagine, because it's not their job. So when I hear from parents and parents and kids, I want to hear what they're saying behind it and build for them as a professional what they're really looking for, even if they don't have the right words to say it. Henry Ford said, if I'd asked my customers what they wanted, they'd have said a faster horse. Right. So
Yeah,
so
totally.
so we want to consider that. So I don't know why I brought that up, but it was in context somewhere. And now I'm going to move on to answer your real question. Oh, I know what it was. It was about changing our own curriculum.
You're right. It
what
is
else?
tough when you're talking about your own subject area and thinking of how it might be different.
Yeah. And everybody thinks their curriculum's the hardest. Everybody does.
Yeah. Well,
It's
math
not.
is, but
No, it's not.
I'm just kidding.
It's not. To me, it is. I don't know. I'm not giving math teachers an out on that because I have seen a lot of math teachers go, got you, boom, I can do this, you are one. There's another guy out in western Kansas who said, got it. And you know the difference was those math teachers understood math. They didn't just go by the algorithms, and this is what we've always done, so you're going to do it that way. They understood what the concepts of math were and could translate it to beyond the four walls of school. It's relevance, right?
Yeah.
That's what the trick is. So a project that we did, gosh, there are so many of them. Which one do I want to go to that's delicious? I have some just plain old go-tos. But I don't know. Do you have one that's a favorite, like playlist you want to think about?
Well,
I'm trying to think.
I love the Viking ship one, but if you got one, go for it.
I can tell the Viking ship, but I feel like told the Viking ship one 150 billion times.
I know.
And I can go back to it if you want to. I can make it a quick, tight one. But so my 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders, we were involved in a video conference group. This was with, and they've changed a little bit since then, but it's the Global Nomads group. And they have really delicious questions, big questions that they connect you with schools all across the United States and into other countries to really dig into this from different kids' points of view. And when we started with them, they were still kind of new. They didn't have any middle school programs. All they had was high school. And I talked to them and I convinced them that my kids were brilliant and they could hang with high schoolers. And they did. They weren't quite as good. They were just like dumb high schoolers is all they were. But they fit in still. There were schools with high schools that my kids outshone. I totally did. But anyway, one of the questions was, what should the United States and other countries do with our nuclear weapons that are falling out of date, that are starting to decay and are starting to get dangerous? So what should we do about, and really the question came down to, what do we do about nuclear proliferation? And so my kids really dug into it. And the global, it's a tough topic for 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. First of all, say the word proliferation, right? So they're learning some things, right? So that when the school board members come in and my kids are like, well, today we talked about the proliferation and we think that. And so what they did is the Global Nomads group gave them 4 options and said, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this, or we could do this, and dive into those. And they were very written very briefly. And so the kids are like, what does that mean? I'm like, well, let's go in and find out, right? So we dug in and looked around. Now, I'm not an expert on nuclear proliferation at all. So kids were able to talk to different experts. We had Dr. George Look from the U.S. State Department at the time come in and talk to our kids through a video conference. I say come in and talk to all of the groups in the schools. And so, but each school, we got to go around and ask him questions and things like that. And there was a tense moment where my kids kind of tried to hold his feet to the fire based on what the Kansas City Star was saying about Honeywell, but he told them they were wrong and that the newspaper was wrong. And my kids were like, but wait. And I was like, oh, we're just moving on. They're like, maybe the guy from the State Department doesn't know what he's talking about. And maybe he does. Maybe we're not getting all the info. But so the kids researched all 4 of them and said, this isn't something we believe. And I said, well, then what's our 5th option? And they came up with a plan that would work to help all our nations to do it safely. We were with a school in Canada they were near where the yellow sands come from. It's where we pull uranium or plutonium, or I don't know, it's been a couple of years, I've slept since then, but I learned this stuff right alongside the kids, right? And so we were talking with the school in Canada like that. And Canada was, of course, nailing our kids in the U.S. as being war hawks. And it was a very interesting, a lot of learning goes through that. And the kids still talk about it. I'm connected with many, many of those kids. And I call them kids. They're in their 20s now. Some of them are early 20s, but still. Yeah. So the Viking ship was one that it was a day. I needed my kids to learn about the Vikings, and I could have spent a week on it, but we don't talk about the Vikings for that long in class, and time's moving, right? So I gave them the challenge. I told them a story that hooked them into thinking about, Vikings here in the United States and in Minnesota, as a matter of fact. And I said, let's build a Viking ship today. We'll build a 1/5 scale model. And the reason I picked 1/5 scale models because my 5th and 6th graders they're terrible at fractions. And so we were practicing fractions all day long. And they got in, they researched, what do we know about the Vikings and all that, and what they wear and eat, and what do the boats look like, and what were they. We found out that most of the boats were either buried or burnt, so it's hard to find the good primary sources, but they were getting in there to it. And finally we found one, the Osterberg ship, and they decided to recreate it, 10 foot long, 4 foot wide, 2 foot deep. We were doing math, we were doing reading and writing and research and speaking and lots of engineering, and we built that friggin' boat in a day. and the kids, if you come into it and not look for it, it looks like it's a craft project. But if you were to talk to the kids about the Vikings, they could tell you stories, they could tell you people, they could tell you, and I guarantee you that if I asked them today, they could still tell you about them, because it's contextualized. It's connected to other memories, a sense memory in their brain. And I do know that even kids who weren't in that class, because we hung the boat over our stairwell, it's suspended there. So when people would come to visit the school, they would say, whoa, what's that? We had kids who weren't even in that classroom who would tell all about the Vikings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and kids were talking.
Yeah. Yes. And this is just one day, one project. The very first project, that first year I told you that I only had one good project. That was, I created a project called Earthquakes, Are We Safe? And at the time, Kansas wasn't having earthquakes.
Yeah.
And
that changed.
And my kids, that changed a lot. But they found out that, no, actually, we weren't safe. In fact, Manhattan, Kansas at the time, if they were to be hit by a certain category, that's not the right term, help me out, a certain magnitude.
Yeah,
magnitude, at a certain depth. Yeah. See, I needed you there because I didn't even realize those were math terms. Yeah, that makes sense. Magnitude. Hey. Anyway, that the Tuttle Creek Dam in Manhattan would be liquefied, and the entire town of Manhattan would be covered 6 feet deep of water in 6 hours. And so we took a field trip to Manhattan, and they were actually repairing the dam, and we got to talk. Oh gosh darn, it was amazing. And we talked to building, like city managers about building codes. What the heck do I know about any of that? My kids were having great questions, and I'm like, well, let's talk to some people. And we talked to learn how to make phone calls rather than emails, because people ignore emails, but phone calls, they would actually talk to them. And my kids had to sound like they weren't stupid kids, so they had to practice a lot. And who's really good at making phone calls are the not rich kids, the kids who come from like harder places, a little harder poverty, and they aren't as afraid to talk to people because they talk to people more. In middle school or middle class families, moms and dads make the phone calls. That wasn't true in this particular case. My other boys were like, oh yeah, you're scared there? I'll say Danae, that was not her name, but I'm just trying to think of some. I'm sorry. Anyway, just go, I'll do this. And, on the phone and making the calls. And we would just look at those kids, with awe, like, I thought you were supposed to be a dumb kid, or you're poor, or you're less than, and here you are saving our butts with this project,
Yeah.
So kids get to pull together and be people.
Yeah. And then kids get to see the value of their classmates, right? Like if the only way we're valuing students is by what they can regurgitate at the end of the hour or at the end of the week or at the end of the month, then only certain students feel valued, and only certain students get seen as being valued, and the other ones don't. And yes,
for better or for worse, there's a reason why there's a certain complexion in our gifted programs, that there's a certain complexion in our valedictorians. There's a certain level of economic status. It's not true everywhere, and it's not true every time, but overwhelmingly across the board, it's true. Because school is not set up for kids who come from hard places.
Yeah.
School is set up to mold them into something else. And when you're dealing with hard life, there's a lot of science around this trauma. And I know there's a lot of people who've gone to a workshop or a conference about trauma-informed work, and they're like, oh, we're trauma-informed now because we had a speaker come. This work takes a lot more. You think project-based learning is hard? That's a snap. We're changing people's lives when we're starting to talk about trauma-responsive learning.
Well, what I love about both of those projects, well, you kind of shared about 3 projects there. What I love about all of them is they started with this question that kids are like, are we safe? And then they can take off from there. But even if that's just a starting point, is what's a compelling question that kids would want to know more information about? And then letting them go from there and, let's see where this question takes us. I'm not sure.
That's the art of teaching now. Instead of giving questions that were fed to us about curriculum, it's to figure out who our babies are and what sort of things are they interested in, and how do we start to role model questions for them that they actually would love to ask, but we've schooled it out of them. Shh, be quiet. That's off topic. I'm not talking about that now. Be quiet. And so now they've learned to stop asking questions by, I don't know, first grade.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So now we've got to reteach them that we can be curious, and it's really freaking cool, and it leads to cool stuff. And guess what? We can get credit for it too.
So awesome. Okay, so we're just about out of time, but I'd be doing my co-host, Jennifer Farr, injustice if I didn't ask this last question. And so all of this is super good, and it's something that we need to dig into. And in just a minute, I'm going to ask for your contact information so if teachers want to learn more about this. But I'm maybe a new teacher, or this conversation has sparked me to try something new in my class. So tomorrow when I walk into my classroom, what's one thing I can do tomorrow to start making some of these changes, to do something different in my classroom?
First things first, get connected with other educators who are doing this. Stop saying social media is the devil and use it for your own personal good. I know you don't have time. I know. Just go ahead and keep doing what you've always been doing. Okay. So get connected. 1. 2, if you don't know how to get connected, we're going to talk about that. 2, start looking at kids through their strength lens. Stop telling them where they're wrong, slow, weak, and stupid, and find ways to find them amazing. There's a strategy called a 2x10. I don't know if you're familiar with this.
No.
Spend 10 days in a row connecting with a person that you're having troubles with. So pick that kid that you really, it's hard to love them, right? 10 days in a row, sit down, have a conversation, a 2-minute conversation with them. That's all. Never about behavior, never about school, nothing. It's lightweight. Just have a conversation and look for things where they're amazing. 10 days in a row, think about it before, think about the kid after. Things will have been different. Start at 2x10. So start figuring out who the kids are, their strengths. Once we can start to figure out their strengths, then we got to figure out how to maximize those strengths. How can I have an opportunity for them to really show off in a good way those strengths? Because a kid will be more willing to come toward me and do what I'm asking them to do when they are recognized for being somebody, even if it's a small thing. I got a kid named Chris. he's 180 mile an hour and 180 degrees the wrong direction. I can see it from here, right? But I'm not going to come up to him and be like, Chris, you're freaking wrong again. I'm not doing that. I want to come up and be like, Chris, look how hard you are working, man. You got some stuff getting done here. Show me what you have, right? I'm recognizing that he's at least working because he doesn't usually work at all. Right. So, well, show me what you got. What do you got? Oh my gosh. Where did you find that out? Oh, hey, how do we know that's a high quality website? Hey, now we're digging into, and not letting him get by. I'm not saying, wow, you're so smart and amazing. Keep going 180 degrees wrong direction.
Yeah.
I'm not doing that. We're talking truth, but I'm starting with love. So those are two big things.
Man, that is the best advice, Ginger. That's so good. There are so many students who don't even feel like they have a strength because no one's ever addressed them about that. And so coming from that place is some of the best advice. I'm going to take it tomorrow. I'm going to use that same advice. So I appreciate that. So one of your pieces of advice was to connect with other educators who are doing these kinds of things. So speaking of connecting, how can teachers connect with you?
Yeah, so I'm not necessarily the smartest girl in the room at all. I am connected to people who are pretty darn brilliant and who are doing things. That to me is my role. So when you come to me and you say, hey, I need help with, I just did that today. I had somebody who said, I'm a special education teacher. I need to connect with other really innovative special education teachers. I'm like, special education and innovative? No, man, special education is about laws. Good luck finding this, but I'm going to try. And I'm getting this teacher connected with other people, right? It's happening because I'm connected. Yeah. What is it? You know more people than you think you know, right? It's the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Yeah. So use my network for a while, which is what this other teacher is doing until she can get her own. So how you can reach out to me is Twitter and Facebook is the best. So Twitter, I'm at Ginger Lewman, and it'll be spelled here. But on Facebook really is better where you can get me because we can have a real conversation there, not 280 characters, that we can actually have a threaded conversation. I'm also on Snapchat, I'm on Instagram, I'm in a million different places because you're not. You're in only one or two because that's all you can afford for time. So I want to cross networks for people. Yeah.
And you have a website and a book?
I do. I think I left my book at work today. So my website is gingerlewman.org or .com, either way. Funny enough, it's easy to remember, for me at least. And, my book is called Lessons for Life Practice Learning. It's about project-based learning. It really is a project-based learning primer. I call it Lessons for Life Practice Learning because if we say we're helping kids to be ready for life, my gosh, we ought to be practicing life in school every day a whole lot more than we currently are right now in some sort of artificial bell-driven rows in a silent construct. I want it to feel more like real life right now.
Yeah, and that's why I think everything that you stand for and talk about aligns so well with Kansas's new vision and the whole redesign. I think that's what we're trying to do is help kids be prepared to be successful in life. And you're right. That means we have to practice what life looks like, and project-based learning is a great way to do that. So,
yeah. We're building skills. We're student learning skills. We're oh my gosh, I'm just testing myself right here. I had them all until I started talking. Well, apparently I'm out of words for the day. Justin, I'm done. Speaking, personalized learning, real world learning, and connecting with the community. Those 4 things. That's what I'm all about.
Got it. Ginger Lewman, it's so great to talk to you again. I've missed our conversations, but thank you for sharing who you are and what you stand for with our audience. And I'm sure you'll have teachers connecting with you and wanting to learn more about how we can do best for our kids. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm honored to have been here.
Bye.